This lesson is going to be on how to write expressions. We're first going to talk about the difference between an equation and an expression. An equation is just an expression that has an equal sign. And an expression is a combination of terms. And it could have variables and it could have just numbers. When you're writing an expression, you have to make sure to label your variable. That means you have to state what the variable stands for. You can't just have a variable without knowing what it is and what it represents. Task 1. Ashley started with $217 in her bank account. She deposits $25.50 each week and never withdraws any money. Write an expression to represent this situation. Now, since she's depositing the money each week, we don't know how many weeks it is, so I'm going to use a variable. I'm going to use x and say that x is equal to the number of weeks. This is me labeling my variables. Now, so she starts with 217, and if she deposits, that means she puts in, so we're going to add on the 25.50 or 25.5 times the number of weeks x, and that would be my expression. Task 2. The cost to rent a scooter is $15.50 per hour. The cost to rent a watercraft is $22.80 per hour. Write an expression to show the cost to rent both the scooter and the watercraft for any number of hours. In this case, I don't have to rent them for the same number of hours, so I'm going to use two different variables. X is going to be the hours for the scooter, and Y is going to be the hours for the watercraft. Now, since it's $15.50 per hour for the scooter, that's going to be represented by 15.5x. And if we're renting them both, we're going to add on the cost for the watercraft, which is 22.8 times y. Now, I'm going to use my expression to determine the cost to rent the scooter for 3.5 hours and the watercraft for 1 3/4 hours, which is the same thing as 1.75. So now instead of the x, I have 3.5 hours, so I'm going to have 15.5 times 3.5 plus the 22.80 or 22.8 times the 1.75. Now to simplify, I do my order of operations first. 15.5 times 3.5, 54.25, and the 22.80 times 1.75 is 39.9. And when I add those two numbers together, I have 94.15. So it costs a total of $94.15 to rent the scooter for 3.5 hours and the watercraft for 1 3/4 hours. Amelia earns $8.74 per hour plus a gallon gas allowance of $3.50 per day at her job. Write an expression and evaluate for 5.5 hours. Writing the expression, I'm going to use a variable first. H is my number of hours. So she earns $8.74 per hour, so 8.74H, plus the gas allowance of $3.50 per day. And we're just going to not have a variable with that because it's just talking about in one day. Now to evaluate, I'm going to replace my H or substitute my H for 5.5 to determine how much money she's going to earn. So 8.74 times 5.5 is 48.07 plus the $3.50 for the gas allowance. And when I add those numbers together, I have 51.57. So that means Amelia would earn $51.57 for that day of working 5.5 hours. And the last one, a tank containing 35 gallons of water is leaking at a rate of 1/4 gallon per minute. Write an expression to determine the number of gallons left in the tank after m minutes. Now they tell us the variable to use, so I can't use a different variable. So it starts with 35 gallons, and if it's leaking, it's losing, so it's going to be a subtraction. 1/4 of a gallon, so 1/4 per minute, which is m. So it's just 35 minus 1/4 m.